was blaming his old business partner for claiming indigenous identity and getting those tax breaks, etc. It wasn't his fault. It was his business partner's fault. He shouldn't be held accountable, he says. So we'll look at that. BC election seems more crooked every passing day. And I mean, I don't know how anybody could have any kind of faith in these election results at this point in time. And what is John Rustad doing? People are saying maybe he's expecting a collapse and he doesn't want to have his fingerprints all over it. But I mean, I think strong leadership would call this out for what it is, because it looks like fraud. It looks like rampant fraud. And a strong leader would call that out. So I'm disappointed in Rustad. Trump effect. We got to start at the Trump effect. And honestly, what's going on in the United States right now, just 3 days after the election, and Trump's not even going to be inaugurated for months yet, it's unbelievable. And when I talk about strong leadership, I will give you an example of what I mean by strong leadership in one of Trump's speeches. And we'll watch, it's 3 minutes, but it's worth watching every single second of that speech, I think. Attack on Remembrance Day. Yeah, we started with that. And Calgary needs to borrow $1 billion for basic infrastructure. Isn't that why the city levies taxes? To pay for the basic infrastructure, roads, water, all of that basic stuff, right? Yeah, no, that's not why they do it. They do it for virtue signaling for Gondik and stuff. Weird, right? So weird. Lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start with the Trump effect, as I said. And Tyler says, is the 14th Amendment their backup plan? And we're just going to listen to a minute of this because they're still trying to get rid of Trump. And as I've said, we're not out of danger yet. We have now until the inauguration day. All of that said, I think Trump's probably in good shape for doing what he wants to do. So here is Jimmy Dore just talking about how they're going to try and, well, one of the ways they're probably going to try and stymie a Donald Trump presidency. Here we go.
The 14th Amendment, here it is. It said, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elected president shall have engaged in insurrection. That's why it was so important for the FBI to instigate January 6th, and that's why Nancy Pelosi made sure there wasn't any National Guard or security there, and the rest of the cops took the gates away and the fences away, and they swung the doors wide open.
Jamie Raskin in Congress has said, let people vote for Trump if they want. We're not going to certify his election anyway. So he may be elected, but we're not going to let him be inaugurated.
Because they're going to invoke that clause from the 14th Amendment saying Trump incited an insurrection. Here he is saying it.
It's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. Civil War conditions, all because the 9...
All because...
So there you go. So... could it happen? Well, we'll see. We've got a little bit of time to wait, but we'll see. Neville says that's why this recent video Tucker put out has resonated with many, but also rattled people that haven't heard verbiage this strong. The second term will likely be 4 years of disclosure, along with America being put first in every single policy. It's no wonder that it's the most attacked conspiracy theory by the media of the time was Q. So here is Tucker Carlson talking about what he thinks the next 4 years is going to look like. Here we go.
But the main reason they don't want Donald Trump back in Washington is something called disclosure. Do you know what disclosure is? Disclosure means sunlight. Disclosure is the principle that you, as an American citizen, an equity owner of this country, not a renter, not a serf, not a slave, but as a citizen, an owner of this country, a person on whose behalf the government exists. There's no other reason to have the government except to serve you, that you have a right to know what that government is doing with your money in your name. It's not a privilege that you are granted. If they're in a good mood one day, you can know a little bit more about how John F. Kennedy was murdered in 1963. You have an absolute moral right to know because you own it. They're your employees who somehow have decided they're your overlords. And they're very concerned that if Donald Trump comes back to Washington, we're going to find out what's happened to the $100 billion that we've sent Ukraine. What happened to that money?
Pretty crazy, right? And people are interested. What happened to that money? Where'd that money go? Where'd that money go, right? And Ron Paul says, this week, federal chairman Jerome Powell was asked if he would step down if President Trump asked him to resign. Powell said, no, the law does not permit the president to fire the Fed chairman. Darn shucks, eh? Powell didn't mention, however, that the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional to begin with. No power was ever granted to the federal government to create a monopoly bank that manipulates interest rates and counterfeits money. So the big issue is not who has more authority over the other, the president or the Fed chairman. The issue is that the Federal Reserve should not exist at all. So interesting. There's lots of talk swirling as well about how Trump is distancing himself from RFK Jr. and Elon Musk is not going to have an official position in the Trump administration, but an advisory role. And I heard that yesterday and I looked at it and I looked at the sources and I dismissed it almost immediately. I thought, oh yeah, this is the same nonsense as it's just disinformation that is meant to confuse and sow kind of mixed feelings against Trump, oh, well, okay, feel kind of betrayed, right? But I don't think it's true. So here is Clinton. He says, holy cow, I might actually be able to tell the truth on YouTube again. This will send shockwaves through all the big tech and intelligence agencies. So here's Donald Trump talking about free speech. It's almost 7 minutes, worth every minute. We're not going to watch all of it, but we'll watch the first minute at least. Here we go.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that. If this most fundamental right is allowed to perish, then the rest of our rights and liberties will topple, just like dominoes, one by one. They'll go down. That's why today I'm announcing my plan to shatter the left-wing censorship regime and to reclaim the right to free speech for all Americans. And reclaim is a very important word in this case because they've taken it away. In recent weeks, bombshell reports have confirmed that a sinister group of deep state bureaucrats, Silicon Valley tyrants, left-wing activists, and depraved corporate news media have been conspiring to manipulate and silence the American people. They have collaborated to suppress vital information on everything from elections to public health. The censorship cartel must be dismantled and destroyed, and it must happen immediately. And here's my plan. First, within hours of my inauguration, I will sign an executive order banning any federal department or agency from colluding with any organization, business, or person to censor, limit, categorize, or impede the lawful speech of American citizens. I will then ban federal money from being used to label domestic speech as mis- or disinformation. And I will begin the process of identifying and firing every federal bureaucrat who has engaged in domestic censorship, directly or indirectly, whether they are the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Health, Human Services, the FBI, the DOJ, no matter who they are. Second, I will order...
He goes through a whole list, and it's too much, but you should check it out. We're going to listen to this one. This one's great. Honestly, great. If he could do this, if he could do just this, he would still go down as a better president than all of the other modern presidents since 2000 combined. Add in Bill Clinton and the Bushes, and maybe not Reagan, but only just. Here we go.
Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable. We will also investigate whether Big Pharma or others have illegally marketed hormones and puberty blockers which are in no way licensed or approved for this use. My Department of Education will inform states and school districts that if any teacher or school official suggests to a child that they could be trapped in the wrong body, they will be faced with severe consequences, including potential civil rights violations for sex discrimination and the elimination of federal funding. As part of our new credentialing body for teachers, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. The bill will also make clear that Title IX prohibits men from participating in women's sports, and we will protect the rights of parents from being forced to allow their minor child to assume a gender which is new and an identity without the parents' consent. The identity will not be new, and it will not be without parental consent. No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this, what's happening today. It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. Under my leadership, this madness will end. Thank you very much.
I was trying to see how much longer it was. It gets a little clumsy. I think he's clumsy with the language there. Like, not without parental consent. He's like, forget it. This is made up. It's never been heard of in human history before. And that's my feeling on it. So, I mean, the clumsy language notwithstanding, it could have been delivered maybe a little bit punchier. But still, that's the strong... It's not 16 years old and the school will notify the parents. It's not 18 years old before the government's going to be paying for it. This is nonsense. Everyone damn well knows it's nonsense. It's nonsense, and people should act like it. And I'm glad that the leader of the free world, the Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, is able to articulate this very clearly and say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not having public funds used for this, and hospitals are not going to be allowed to do this. This is mutilation. This is nothing else. And like, bravo, good for him for saying it so plainly, because apparently it's really difficult, right? Danielle Smith, leading report, is talking about this, but a whole bunch of other people are as well. Donald Trump is reportedly planning to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Plan. He did that before. He did that in 2017 when he took office, when he was elected. And that's not a surprise. And yeah, it's a scam. It is an absolute scam. We need to defund the Paris climate deal. We need to defund the United Nations. We need to defund the WHO. We need to strengthen nations' internal institutions, strengthen our own borders, strengthen our own employment and self-sufficiency, and like a whole lot more. But jeepers creepers, like what we're doing right now is not on the right path at all. What our country, Canada's doing is not the right path. Patriot Lady says the president of the EU has announced that they will now be buying natural gas from the United States instead of Russia after Trump's victory. Shocking. I mean, I'm shocked. I'm so shocked by all of this. Here you go.
I would not say discuss, but we touched upon yesterday. It's the whole topic of LNG. We still get a lot of LNG via Russia, from Russia. And why not replace it by American LNG, which is cheaper for us and brings down our energy prices, but is something where we can get into a discussion, also what our trade deficit is concerned. So engage, look at common interest, and then negotiate. I would not say discuss, but we touched upon yesterday.
So the LNG is cheaper, and Donald Trump said last time around, if you guys say Russia's an enemy, how can you buy gas from Russia? Like, if they're an enemy, aren't they an enemy? And if they're not an enemy, then buy gas from them. But if they are an enemy, aren't they an enemy? Like, so it seems really weird to me, right? It just seems very odd that we would be in a situation where all of a sudden Donald Trump's elected and they're able to recognize that, oh, American LNG is a whole lot cheaper for us. Maybe we should do that. David Knight highlights this. Qatar has notified Hamas officials that they are no longer welcome and must immediately make preparations to depart. Time for Canada Foreign Affairs Minister Mel Joly to quit repeating Hamas talking points on every event in Gaza and join Qatar on the new U.S. foreign policy agenda. So the Jerusalem Post is reporting, "You are not welcome here," Qatar tells Hamas. And then there's more people talking about that as well. OSINT Defender says Qatar has notified Hamas officials saying that staying in the country that they are no longer welcome and must immediately make preparations to depart. So it's well known, and I've said before, Hamas is funded. The leadership of Hamas lives in Qatar. They're protected in Qatar. And the funding goes through Qatar for Hamas, right? And so, I mean, if nobody's actually addressing that, then they're not actually addressing the problem. Trump said yesterday, or a day and a half ago, that he wanted hostages released and the conflict over, and they have until his inauguration day to do what's right, basically, or he'll make sure they do what's right. I'm paraphrasing, but you see what I mean. And so the Trump effect is real, right? People are responding quick, very, very fast. Here's Peter Sweden. He says, Trump has promised to never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency to protect people from government tyranny. So here he is talking about central bank digital currency.
And tonight I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. You know about that?
Good. So there's that. So the greenback will be around, and apparently Putin's agreed to sell oil in U.S. dollars, right? In addition to everything else they sell in with BRICS. So that's interesting. Chrystia Freeland says, "Today I chaired the first meeting of the reestablished Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations. Here's how it went. Donald Trump hates her." And actually, they ask a question. Like, there's a question about that. And I think he also hates the red dress. So she's wearing Donald Trump's favorite dress. Here is Chrystia Freeland talking about Canada-U.S. relations.
We just had earlier today the first meeting of the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee, which I will be chairing with Minister LeBlanc as the vice chair. This committee will be an operational, action-oriented committee. The idea is that it will operate in the way that the COVID committee operated, bringing together ministers to address in a working fashion an urgent issue. We had a really, really good, very productive, very constructive conversation. We focused on the Canada-U.S. trading relationship and the border, and we agreed that we will be meeting often, and we'll have another meeting early next week.
So that's interesting. And then, so the press there ask, why are you leading this if Donald Trump hates you? True North says, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland has asked why she is leading negotiations against potential U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods when President-elect Trump has expressed dislike for her.
Donald Trump has said he doesn't like you very much. Donald Trump has said that he doesn't like you very much in the past. What makes you the best person to lead the Canadian government's efforts here?
I think that President Trump will obviously speak for himself, and I would never put words in his mouth. But in my experience, President Trump respects strength, and he respects people and countries who are strong and clear in defending their countries, in defending their national interest. That's what I've always done, and that's what I will continue to do. And the proof that that approach works is, I would say, threefold. One, we did a really good trade deal with the previous Trump administration. We did a win-win deal that works for the U.S., that works for Canada. I think that we are going to find that some of the key...
The USMCA, it was not easily negotiated, and there's all sorts of... there were all sorts of problems with that. And at the end of that whole thing, Trump was basically like, never send that woman to negotiate with me again. And it wasn't even Trump himself. It was it Blinken? There was somebody else. And I can't remember the name, but it was a funny name. There was something phonetic about it that made me laugh. And she was talking about working with him. Kinzinger? I think it was Kinzinger, maybe. Regardless, that whole trade deal was a disaster. Here's what Trump thinks about the Canadian regime. Okay, like this is from 2 years ago, I think, and during the trucker convoy. Here's Trump talking about that.
The tyranny we have witnessed.
Oh, sorry, too fast. I knew it. I knew I left some too fast, but oh well. Life is such some days, right? So I don't want to make it too slow now. Okay, that's good.
The tyranny we have witnessed in Canada in recent weeks should shock and dismay people all over the world. In an advanced Western democracy, the peaceful movement of patriotic truckers, workers, and families protesting for their most basic rights and liberties has been violently put down. Their assets and life savings have been frozen. They have been slandered as Nazis, racists, and terrorists. These are the names they've been called. They've been arrested and charged with phony crimes. They've been falsely accused of loyalty to foreign powers. I watched them. I saw those maple leafs all over the flags and the love for their country. Plenty of Americans were there too, and they love our country. They're being hunted down like enemies of their own government and treated worse than drug dealers and murderers or rapists. A line has been crossed. You're either with the peaceful truckers or you are with the left-wing fascists. And that's what's been happening. And it's been a strong line. We stand with the truckers and we stand with the Canadian people in their noble quest to reclaim their freedom.
So there you go. We'll see. We'll see how this whole thing works. Trudeau was asked another question for Trudeau on Donald Trump, followed by another spastic and unhinged response. Yeah, he seems weird. I don't want to listen to him. I listened to it. He doesn't really say anything. He says we're going to work with Donald Trump and we're going to do what we did before, and he sounds like an idiot. So let's just move on. Okay, you can watch it if you want to. Links in the description. Okay, let's talk about Remembrance Day and the denigration of our culture and the denigration of all of the traditions that we grew up on. Anyway, I grew up on, and I had family that was in the Second World War, and Remembrance Day was an important thing for us. I have family, all sorts that are involved now in our modern military, right, all across the world. So like, there's all sorts of interesting things that we're doing, but the Marxists, well, we're not celebrating our lest we forget history. We are changing Remembrance Day into a Marxist aligned holiday. That's what's going on here. And so the best damn roofer is highlighting this. He says, grandfathers didn't go to war for this garbage. And it's the poppy with the rainbow flag, right? So it's the rainbow Pride Progress flag, which has got the circle and the chevron, and it looks like I can't remember what they call it. The Nazi signal. I can't remember what it's called. Regardless, to me, it looks like a penis and balls. And I think I've shown this before, but it does. It looks like a penis and balls. And this is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Canada is, once again, because this happened before, they are trying to remove praying from the Remembrance Day ceremony. And so Chris says, disgusting, liberals are trying to ban prayer at our Remembrance Day ceremonies again. It's an insult to veterans and an attack on fundamental freedoms. Conservatives will fight for the freedoms for chaplains to pray at Remembrance Day ceremonies. They don't have any time. It has been just one day. Like, this was announced, like Friday? So it's happening Monday. So good. There's not enough time for the backlash to take effect, right? Here is the interaction on the House floor.
Madam Speaker, last year the Liberals imposed a ban on military chaplains from reciting prayers at Remembrance Day. Chaplains, veterans, and Canadians immediately fought back, and the government relented, well, for a year. But the directive is back. These Liberals are imposing their ideological ban yet again. Remembrance Day is a time for reflection and healing and hope. And for many veterans, praying is part of that journey. Will the government end its attack on the vocation of chaplains and allow them the freedom to pray?
Yeah. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire du ministre de la Défense nationale. Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity first to thank our members and our veterans for their service and their sacrifice. But let's be absolutely clear. The Chaplain General issued this directive independently, and it does not ban prayer. Actually, the directive simply seeks to help our CAF chaplains make their public addresses more inclusive to reflect the spiritual diversity of Canadians and our CAF members, Madam President.
L'Honorable Député de Grande Prairie Mackenzie.
After relenting last year, Madam Speaker, the Liberal Minister of Defence promised, and I quote, chaplains are not and will not be banned from prayer on Remembrance Day, but that isn't true. They've now issued an even more draconian order saying that chaplains will be monitored and disciplinary measures will be imposed on those who say the word God or those who pray.
Shame.
This censorship is unthinkable. Will the government finally relent, end their attack on the work of chaplains, and allow them the freedom to pray?
Yeah.
No. Nope. They're continuing to try to attack people for wanting their culture celebrated in the way that they recognize, right? Andrew Scheer's responding to this. Disgusting. Liberals ban chaplains from praying at Remembrance Day ceremonies. Imagine telling veterans who fought to defend religious freedom that their own government would ban prayer. That's exactly what Justin Trudeau is doing. Read the Conservative statement here. I'm not going to read that right now, but I'll show you all the people who are responding to this, and they're attaching the statement as well. The statement is essentially back like what the minister was saying in the House. I'll give you the highlights in a minute. Shove says, and he's Shove Majumdar, and he's a Conservative member of Parliament from Calgary Heritage. He says, NDP Liberals ban military chaplains from prayer on Remembrance Day. Our veterans fought so we could enjoy freedoms that we do today, including the freedom to worship. It's time to replace woke nonsense with common sense. The letter largely covers what the gentleman said on the House floor. One of the things that it says that he didn't, it says, on top of this, the Trudeau government directives remove mention of the word prayer and replaces it with spiritual reflections. The directive goes on to say the chaplain should employ a language mindful of the gender-based analysis principles. If any chaplain chooses to ignore this, they have been warned that they will face disciplinary measures. Chaplains serve a vital role in the Canadian Armed Forces. They represent Canadians of various faiths and support troops from across Canada. Before the NDP Liberal government banned prayers, chaplains were allowed to recite a prayer with faith-specific language during official functions and made sure to invite those of different beliefs to reflect or pray in whatever way they wished. So it was already inclusive. This is an attack, and it's a continued attack. Greg, who is also a MP for Kenora Rainy River MPP, so he's provincial, he says, on Indigenous Veterans Day, we honor the brave Indigenous men and women who served and sacrificed to protect our freedoms. And I liked this comment. Why aren't Indigenous veterans included on Remembrance Day? Divisive. It's divisive. There is no Indigenous Remembrance Day. That's a Marxist, manufactured Marxist, made-up bullshit thing. Okay? It doesn't actually exist, just like trans people. Okay? Period. So it's dumb, and we should stop dividing like this. Pierre Poilievre says Canada's veterans should have nothing but pride in wearing a uniform in which they defended freedom against tyranny and continue to guard the flame of freedom today, lest we forget the debt we owe our armed forces members who made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm glad the school reversed this disgraceful policy. So a Halifax school was asking veterans to not wear their uniforms because it might trigger some people, and they've backed off because of backlash, right? So that's what happens when backlash actually happens. When they release things on a Friday afternoon, no backlash can happen, right? So True North says Women and Gender Equality Minister Marcy Ian showcases the Trudeau government's dedication to support and uplift the armed forces through legislation and the establishment of an S2 LGBTQ national monument. Again, it's an attack on common sense. It's an attack on Canadians. It's an attack on our culture to say this LGBTQ monument is for Remembrance Day. Bullshit. That's nonsense. And I'm not saying that women can't contribute to the military. I'm saying the gay people, lesbians, bisexual people, different than the Rainbow Crew. And the Rainbow Crew wants to take over everything. And they're doing it through nefarious means being sneaky, hiding behind gays and lesbians in order to sneak in, right? Here's this interaction.
Madam Speaker, Canadian women and the 2S LGBTQI plus community have played an important role in our country's military efforts. However, many have overcome barriers and discrimination. This includes the LGBTQ purge and sexual misconduct within the Canadian Armed Forces. During this Veterans Week, could the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth share with the House our government's dedication and support to uplift the Canadian Armed Forces?
The Honourable Minister.
Canadian women and 2S LGBTQI plus veterans have faced painful hurdles while serving. This includes the LGBT purge and sexual misconduct within the culture of the armed forces. Canadian military personnel and veterans deserve to be treated with the utmost respect. That's why our government introduced military culture change legislation and a 2S LGBTQI plus national monument that acknowledges that discrimination. We thank these heroes for their service and never forget what they sacrificed to keep our country safe.
Nope. Nope. The whole thing. And sure, right? Celebrate people who actually went to war zones and contributed to the military. Great. No problems. But this whole, it seems contrived, shoehorned in to me. Let's talk about the BC election. Rob says, good morning, everyone. 36 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny expected today in FSJ. The judicial recount in the Surrey riding resulting in a 22-vote win for the NDP brings more questions than trust. What do I mean? 27 more ballots mysteriously showed up and were counted. Were these 27 ballots from a Dominion tabulator error? Were they 27 mail-in ballots found behind a desk? Were they 27 phone-in ballots found in a desk drawer and added? The fact is, November 5th had 19,039 votes. November 8th had 19,066 votes. Where did these votes come from? How did 27 extra votes get added? Have a great day, everyone. So it's election fraud. That's it. Chris says breaking foreign interference in BC elections is not surprising. Will the BC Conservatives call it out, or are they all in it together? Time will tell. I'm terribly disappointed in Rustad, if you don't already know. Sam Cooper is reporting, in my journalistic assessment. Ooh, can I have a journalistic assessment? That's what the show is. Assisted by Mandarin OSINT specialists, there evidently has been significant CCP-affiliated election interference in support of Premier David Eby. This report collects documents from China and Canada. And I've got the link here. This is from the Bureau. Sam Cooper continues, in December 21, then Attorney General Dave Eby approved a $20,000 grant to the Canada Committee 100 Society, the CCS 100, a community organization led by Ding Gao, a prominent journalist from Shanghai, ostensibly aimed at supporting anti-racism initiatives engaging recent Chinese immigrants. The grant has since come under scrutiny from experts and diaspora citizens due to the group's documented links to Beijing's United Front and political donors involved in Eby's 22 NDP leadership campaign. And he continues again, a government press release cited Mr. Ding, a personal friend and advisor to Premier Eby, who stated this project will help us gather detailed relevant data on a wide scale. It also provided opportunities for the Chinese Canadian community, including new immigrants, to engage in the legislative process. While this mission appears commendable, findings from the Bureau's review of public records, including a report from the People's Republic that credits CCS 100 with mobilizing voters in the 2019 federal election, suggest a more complex narrative. So, what's going on there? Moving on, let's talk about... Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.